Yay, we can make Janice promote to panelist.
And for folks who are now joining and making their way into the room, we'll give a few minutes for folks to arrive. And we will also be recording this so that we can post the talk for those who weren't able to make it today.
For those rolling in, we're going to start in 4 minutes per MIT time, but welcome again to the Equity and Social Action in Biomaking seminar series.
I'll take the moment of opportunity while things are quiet here to just let everyone know that we are opened back up here in the space. Things are rolling very slowly. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me. My email jbuck@mit.edu or BioMakerspace@mit.edu will get you to me. and look forward to seeing folks start to make their way back in here for projects very soon.
Cool. I think it's 3:35, so I think we can go ahead and start. But hello and everyone, and welcome to our seminar series on equity and social action in biomaking for this spring semester 2021. We, the MIT BioMakers, are really excited to present this series to you in collaboration with the Huang-Hobbs BioMakerspace and the MIT Department of Biological Engineering. My name is Melody, and I am a junior majoring in course 20, Biological Engineering, and I am currently a member of the MIT BioMakers student group. So first, we would like to acknowledge the land on which MIT sits on today. This is a statement from MIT's land acknowledgement page. MIT acknowledges Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. The land on which we sit is the traditional unceded territory of the Wampanoag Nation. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of their territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected to this land on which we gather from time immemorial. And so with that, we'd like to give a quick run through of the structure of the webinar today. So we'll first begin with a quick introduction on what biomaking is and to kind of introduce you to how that has shaped the community that we hope to create here at MIT as part of the MIT BioMakers. And then we'll introduce the seminar series and finally, most excitingly, open the floor to our first speaker of the series, Dr. Lassalle. And then we'll take any questions from you and kind of end the seminar and welcome you for next time, hopefully. And so in terms of Zoom logistics, please enter any questions you might have in the Q&A box, and we'll open the floor towards the end to collect those questions. And you can also raise your hand to speak and ask your question to Dr. Lassalle personally. And the final reminder is that this webinar is being recorded and will be released to the public. Hopefully we'll have a caption by the end of the month so that you can all see it and share with friends. So a quick introduction about what is biomaking. For many people, this can be defined in a variety of ways, but for the MIT BioMakers, we particularly like to highlight the importance of community in biomaking and the particular importance of inclusion of people in the community at the table. So beyond that, we specifically believe at MIT in student-driven projects and interdisciplinary research because we believe it fosters that community and also aims to involve the public and make biotech and biology more accessible. So who are the MIT BioMakers? We are a community of interested biocurious people. And beyond just maintaining the Huang-Hobbs BioMakerspace, we really want to create that sense of community where people from all sorts of different interests and backgrounds across MIT and around MIT can come together and do a lot of work that uses biology and the tools that biology has. In particular, we hope to help foster student-driven work and this community through the support of the Huang-Hobbs BioMakerspace and through the support of the MIT community with resources and lab space to foster and really grow this community. And you can find out more about our group and the space by visiting biomakers.mit.edu. And if you're interested in joining the BioMakers or helping us plan future biomaking seminar series, the last one that we had was on COVID-19 biomaking in summer. You can feel free to reach out to us at biomakers-exec@mit.edu to join the team. And so now to introduce the series and our first speaker, Dr. Louise Lassalle. So often advances in biotechnology have been limited to those who have the resources and ability to access these technologies to better health, environment, and more. We currently face an age where challenges in health equity and access and more can be addressed with advances in biotechnology and social action. In this series, we would like to promote biomaking organizations where biotechnology is developed and used to solve local and global problems that everyday citizens and people face. In this speaker series, we've invited a range of speakers who are leading biotech companies, nonprofits, and citizen scientists looking towards making the realm of biomaking for social good possible. We'd further like to define equity and social action. Often equity gets conflated with equality, which often means providing the same to all. But here we'd like to really define equity as fair treatment, access, and opportunity for all people with the recognition that we do not all start from the same place and must strive to break down barriers that have prevented full participation of some groups due to systemic discrimination or bias. To that end, we'd really like to highlight several questions that we aim to bring to the forefront in this series, highlighting how equity and current global challenges can be addressed through social action in biomaking. And so hopefully you can keep these questions in mind throughout the seminar series and throughout this seminar. And finally, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Louise Lassalle from the Open Insulin Foundation. She serves as the Assistant Director of Life Design in several departments at Johns Hopkins University. And Dr. Lassalle is a French scientist who earned her PhD in biophysics at the University of Grenoble-Alpes and who came to the US to pursue a career in research. She soon realized her passion was helping students find ways to positively contribute to science, to society through science. When she is not on campus interacting with students, she is promoting affordable access to insulin as the communications project director for the Open Insulin Foundation, a nonprofit organization consisting of a team of volunteers aiming to address the current insulin crisis, some of whom are directly impacted by diabetes and the need for insulin. Today, she will talk about OIF's work in the translation of biotechnology to community action to increase insulin accessibility to all. And now we'd like to open the floor to Dr. Lassalle.
Thank you so much, Melody. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for being here for this presentation. Let me find it. So today I will present you what we have done. Oh, sorry, something go wrong. Let me see. Okay, what we have done at Open Insulin. But I also want to open up a little the discussion because of this series to think about to share our analysis and our reflection about how to bring more equity into the pharma industry and the pharma world and into biotech in general. So can we produce medicine in an equitable way? How to provide a fair access to medicine? And our community labs can play a role in that, and which one? And I think we will see a lot of connection with how the COVID vaccine is being delivered and the access around the COVID vaccine. I think we can do a lot of parallel with that. So just to give you an idea about the prevalence of diabetes today, this is for the US, but we see the same trend worldwide. So now nearly 1 in 2 US adults live with diabetes or pre-diabetes, and it's increasing. Part of this population need insulin, and when they need it every day. It is a life-saving medicine. If we look worldwide, 50% of people who need insulin cannot access it, and that can So if they cannot access, this will impact their health and can lead to death. And just to kind of give order of magnitude, potentially the people dying every year from not having access to insulin is kind of the same order of magnitude than the death toll during World War II. So it's huge. Okay, so why that? What's the technology behind producing insulin? So as you may have heard, because it was 100 years ago, insulin was discovered in the early 20s. And first, it was produced by extracting from pork pancreas, because it's a human insulin that is produced by different mammifers. But of course, having insulin pork was not optimal. And in the 70s, when biotechnology emerged, and we learned how to produce protein from microorganisms. That can be bacteria or yeast, and even more other organisms too. So then it become easier because you have to just modify organisms with your DNA sequence for your targeted protein. Then you will use what we call bioreactors, basically just big tank, and you will make the cell grow until reaching a certain point, and then you purify your extract, you formulate it, and you can give it to patient. So we know how to do that. We have done that for 50 years. And a lot of medicine are done on this way, like antibodies, and actually some vaccines are done this way too. The second big advantage with this technique is since you have access to the DNA sequence, you can start modifying it. For insulin, the modification don't impact the activity per se of the molecule. So it's a hormone, so it will go and interact with the receptor at the surface of the cells to get so the sugar can enter the cells basically. So this will not change, but insulin can be in two forms: an active one and an inactive one. And depending of the modification you can do in the amino acid sequence, you can get more of one or more on the other. If you have a lot of monomeric form, then you will have what we call a rapid-acting insulin. So the insulin who have been modified, the sequence have been modified, we call them analogs. And when they've been modified to be more active, like rapidly active, then we call them rapid acting, like aspart or lispro. That's the name of some insulin. So if you look in yellow is a human insulin, as the one from the same sequence that we have in our body. So you see that they will be active after 2 hours after the injection. I mean, you need to inject yourself, wait, and then have your meal 2 hours after. So you really need to know exactly when you will have your meal. Then with the rapid acting, it's just 30 minutes after, so you can give you more freedom about when you want to have your meal. So it really have a huge impact of the quality of life of people with diabetes. The other type that is super important and really have a huge impact of the quality of life too is the long acting. So this one can be active until even 24 hours, and now they have some that can be active for 48 hours. So it's very nice, especially at night, to maintain glucose level, a sugar level in your body that is stable. So with these two, people with diabetes have not been just only able to get a better quality of life, but also if you can manage better your blood sugar, then you will have a less impact, long-term impact on your health too. So, okay, so we know how to produce it. Diabetic is still, like we don't know how to cure it, but we can provide medicine, and you have to inject yourself every day, but you know, you can survive with this medicine. So what's the problem? So the problem is that the insulin prices have skyrocketed nearly 9 times over a 20 years period. So this is for the US only. Here, if you look at this curve, so Humalog is lispro insulin, so rapid one, by Eli Lilly. So that's a pharma company. And here we have a Novalog that is aspart, so same, rapid acting, is by Novo Nordisk. So when they've been entering the US market, they get approved by the FDA. Humalog was around like $30 a vial, and Novalog was around a little less than 50. And as you can see that the price have been increasing. And this in a very weird way because they look a lot the same, but nothing is not, conclusion have not been proved yet. But and so here is stopped at 2016, and since 2018, the price have reached a plateau, largely due for because of the advocacy movement from people with diabetes that have been calling out this very high price of insulin. So because of that, because of the high price of insulin, and because there is no universal healthcare in the US, so people depend on insurance, and if they don't have one, they have to pay full price. 1 in 4 people with diabetes in the US have reported rationing insulin. And this with severe health consequences. So high level of sugar in your body will really impact a lot of different organs and can impact you in a lot of different ways and can bring you to death at some point. So let's look at the insulin market. So I already introduced you to Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk, these are the two pharma who started producing insulin from pork pancreas, so they've been on the market for a very long time. And they mainly, they focus on insulin products. So they will do other stuff, but mainly that. Sanofi is a pharma that do a lot of other stuff, a lot of other medicine. And they enter the market later in the 2000s because they come up with the first long-acting insulin called Lantus. So that's how they get their market share. And now they stop R&D on insulin product, and their market share are more or less reducing. So it's mainly Lilly and Novo Nordisk now. So when looking at that, the first question is, how can we, if we want to reduce the price of insulin, can we bring more competition? There's only 3 players, so let's see what we can do about that. So this is a timeline just to go back to some information I already have shared with you, and kind of show you, talk a little more about what the FDA have been doing to kind of try to increase competition. So as I mentioned before, the late 70s is when we have the first synthetic insulin, and the late 1990s when we have the first analogs. So the FDA has been passing law to encourage generics. In the case of biologic, we don't call it generic because it's very difficult to be sure, even using the same process, that you will have exactly the same molecule. That is easier with small molecule, but with protein is more difficult because you are using living organisms to produce them. So the FDA used the term biosimilar. So basically, the proteins that have exactly the same sequence, but the process to produce it may differ. So perhaps you don't use exactly the same strain, or it's not even the same organisms, or the process for purification are different. So at the end of the day, you need to be able to prove by biophysical characterization that the end product is the same, but knowing that the process are not exactly the same, the FDA will call it a biosimilar. In 2020, so last year, the BPCIA entered into full effect, meaning that the FDA no longer requires clinical trial for analog biosimilar insulin. This is only for insulin and is related to the fact that insulin is a small protein that is very well known. They decided that you have still to provide all the full characterization of the molecule, but if you want to enter a biosimilar who already have been approved and is well described, you don't need intense clinical trial. So that make a big change because clinical trials tend to be the more expensive and time-consuming part of submitting a biosimilar for approval by the FDA. Looking back into competition, how biosimilar may increase or not the competition. So at least for the two first analogs, they are not off patent. But for example, the first biosimilar for glargine was actually launched by Eli Lilly. So the same pharma that is doing Humalog. And Sanofi has been also launching biosimilar from Eli Lilly portfolio. The big kind of breakthrough that happened last year was the second biosimilar from biosimilar glargine that was launched by Mekong. So it was a collaboration between a US biotech startup and an Indian pharma company. So they launched with a price per vial of $99. That's kind of way lower than what is now in the market, but it's still it's still very expensive. So just to give you an idea, 99 like 100 was the price like 10 years ago. So it's still lower than what we have now in the market. But just to give you an order of magnitude, producing a vial of insulin with a large scale production cost between $4 or $5 per vial. So there's still a huge difference between the price that patient will pay and the cost of production. So that brings me to one of big concepts that is important for us at Open Insulin, and we think is primordial if you want to have a fair access to biotechnology and producing medicine, is to be open source. So open source has been developed a lot with hardware and IT. So a lot of people have been talking about that, and actually very successful company are coming from this. Open source allow a lot of different things. It really open for more collaboration. Open source also allow not just to share positive results, but also the negative ones, so people don't redo the same mistake, especially in research. We want to share our protocols, but also our modified strains. So that's one of the big things with when you try to produce protein, is to have a strain who have yield, good yield that's enough for industrial production. That kind of criteria that you are looking for. So we will be sharing so both the protocol and the knowledge that we create, but also the modified strain. Just to give you an idea, now with the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, if it was open source and everyone could, or a lot of other like pharmaceutical company could actually produce it, we probably won't have shortage of vaccine. So it's very something to think about fair access. So to let, especially when there's a time-sensitive issue around this. Okay, so just to give you a little more detail about what we do at the scientific level, and what we think community lab could be doing also for perhaps other projects around producing biologics for medicine. So what we do, this part, what we do in the community lab is the R&D part, is what we call the wet lab scale. So that means that we would work with growing cell around like 1 liter to 10 liters. We will start looking into bioreactors soon, but it will remain in this kind of category. So it's really try to optimize so we first start with the plasmid design, optimize it, then optimize the strains, see which combination works better, then optimize the condition of growth. So that's why we use bioreactor to be able then to scale up. Also looking at the purification process, what works well, but what can also be scaled up in a more like industrial environment. Another thing that we're also looking into, but we're probably doing in collaboration, is how to put in place a quality control for that. For now, what we do is we are in collaboration with academic lab to use some of their facility, for example, mass spectrometry, because it's a very good tool for us to make sure we are producing insulin, and we are producing whatever we think we are. And I can go back if you have more questions about the science aspect, but just mainly that's what we are doing in the community lab. Okay, and how we bring insulin to the patient, to the insulin user. So as I mentioned, the R&D will be done in the community biolab, and we are always looking for more collaboration, and we also collaborate with academic lab. Then the idea is, so the production protocol will be open source, so we will be sharing with anyone who need it. Our main goal is to put together insulin cooperatives. So that's the way that we want insulin users to have ownership and to have control over whoever is producing the medicines they depend on. That's for us the way to solve the problem of access of insulin. If you control it, then you always have access to your insulin. So we choose a model of cooperative, so we mix governance with workers and insulin users. We were first thinking to have a small scale production, like one per city, but that is in the US because the FDA have to approve every facility. It probably won't be worth it to be so small, so we probably are more looking to one facility per state. This will also add resilience and sustainability. Now in the US, each pharma have one facility that produce insulin. I mean, it's something happened. Like at some point, I think in last spring, in the Eli Lilly facility to produce insulin, they started to have COVID cases, and so they never closed, but they were getting close to that. So you can imagine what would be the impact if they have to close for any reason. So the idea also is to be more sustainable and to have a more facility to produce insulin. We're also looking to collaborate with a different entity, coming to the US, but also elsewhere. So it could be hospital. There was a hospital in the Netherlands that were producing, so it's more like bed production, so very small amount of protein for like 10 patients, something around this line. So it's not insulin, but it's still producing proteins. And hospital in general have can have clean room or thing like that can be used for protein production. We're also looking to partner with contract manufacturing organization called CMO. These are FDA approved and in general work for pharma when pharma want to have some batch for FDA approval. So they know, they have a deep knowledge of how to produce protein. So that will be a good, we're thinking to start with that, with contracting with the CMO, because it will help us to get insulin faster to our insulin user and then develop all the knowledge we need to be able to implement insulin cooperative. There's also some states who have been passing laws that engage them to produce their own insulin. So a biosimilar insulin, that's a way they found to kind of answer the insulin crisis. So we're also thinking to work with them and collaborate with them to see if they would like to use our protocol and see what kind of collaboration we can put in place. So that's one of the other concepts. So the first one is open source, sharing on the knowledge we have, or whatever we create or we come up with. And then having passion ownership on of the medicine production. So we choose to go for a cooperative model with a shared governance, but we do think that, I mean, it will answer the high prices problem because if the patient decide on the prices, then it shouldn't be that high. But it could also give more give opportunity for patients to actually have a say of what kind of medicine they get. So, for example, some patient may be may have some allergic with some, stuff like you add into the formulation, or then you can do some mix of different insulin analogs. So then they could add for a specific mix that works well for them. So we could think about a lot of other stuff that the patient will be able to have a more personalized response and be sure that the way that their insulin, their medicine is produced, and have a say of how it's produced too. So just to give you an idea, so that's this kind of concept we already try to implement into the Open Insulin Foundation. So we started the project in 2015, and we just got incorporated this year. We put in place a shared governance between volunteers and people with diabetes, so make sure that we are in line with our mission. We have more than 40 active members of people who show up every week on our different group, working group, and work actively on this project. We have more than 200 volunteers worldwide, so people who may come and go and work with us more sporadically. Our project is hosted in 3 community labs, so you may know them, is Culture Lab, so CCL in Auckland, and BioMakers in Santa Clara. So both of them are in California. And Berks is in Baltimore, Maryland. So we arrived in Berks 1 year ago, and we established a new chapter there. Our project is relying on crowdfunding and grants. And we just got a grant from the Abel Foundation for salary equipment. So we will get working on really increasing the yield that we have. So just recently we were able to confirm that we can express and purify Proinsulin Lispro. So we still have work to do. We have mainly is to increase our yield. That's the main thing, but also working on the purification. Proinsulin is just a step before getting insulin, so we need to work on this step too. And then here I just want to show you, so this is from Amgen, like what are the different steps after that. So we'll be scaling up to be able to produce in large bioreactor, then being sure to be consistent, so checking batch to batch consistency to make sure like this is kind of one of those requirements to get approved by the FDA, and using quality control too. The approval by the FDA is twofold. One is making sure, is proving that your molecule is exactly the same that what is already on the market. We will, and the second fold is to show that the way you produce it, so you need to choose a facility to say, okay, this is a facility I will be using to produce the insulin I want to, and commercialize, is consistent. There's a great quality control around that, and you are able to produce the same exact molecule every time with the same level of quality. So with this, so the selecting optimal cell line, we will work on it in the next 6 months also, and then probably we'll start collaborating with a CMO because they do have much more knowledge about all of these parts that we do. So we need to build on that. There's a lot for us to learn. Our volunteers tend to be more science and from academia. So the R&D and all of this, we have a good knowledge around that, but then the more from us industrial part is a little more away from us. So we are still in the learning part of that. Okay, so I'll just give you a little, like that's a little idea, like how we work together. So we are an horizontal organization and we have divided ourselves into working groups. So I mentioned the science group already. Another thing that we want to develop is open source equipment for protein purification. So this is part of the hardware group. That's also something that is very important to us to increase access to medicine, but this equipment could be also used for pedagogic purposes or research purposes. So that's something that we are also working on. Of course, then we need to implement everything that I show you today. So we have a business group that's thinking about the strategy, how we can collaborate with the different partners. We have, of course, a regulatory group to figure out how to go through the FDA process. Then we have groups to support as a nonprofit, so the software group, communication group, and legal and policy group. And then, but not least, we have a group from social scientists that help us think about what we do and what we could share with other more around what does it mean what we do for in general for society in general. So this is just some of us, not everyone there, but we have some people who are nice enough to share their picture with us. And with that, I would like to thank you for being here. And I think we can open it up for questions. Thank
you. I'll give the floor for any questions. I'll put this up really quick. So one of the questions that was asked in the chat that I'll bring up right now was if Sarah was curious if Dr. Lassalle, if you might have any thoughts on the future of the role of the FDA in and specifically a CGMP certification in light of biomaking? Do you imagine a world in which people have 3D printer-esque devices in their homes and can produce things with at-home bio? And how does that certification and regulation look like in that world? And would you be able to point her to resources where people are thinking or working on that space?
So just to clarify, FDA. So FDA would regulate anything that is a medicine. I mean, probably also a little of like if you sell, but basically is medicine. So and technically, I think the FDA won't like if you produce yourself a medicine and you inject yourself, the FDA will not say anything. And I was super for me it was kind of weird to know that, but that apparently that's the case. And that's work also with you like your pet, because I'm not considered like to be a human being. That's so I think first I think there's a big step between 3D printer and produce your own medicine at home. And I don't think is I think it's super expensive. So if we are talking about fair access, just even not talking about like the quality control and all of this, is very expensive. So when people say, yeah, can I produce like insulin in my garage? I'm like, if you can do that, you can just go and buy your insulin because it will be more expensive than that. Also the quality control that you will do at the end. So even if producing the protein, you have a small bioreactors and you basically will use chromatography to purify. This it's not that expensive. You can have it at home more or less. But then to characterize your sample, like what you get at the end, you will need like a HPLC, and this is super expensive and this is big, and you need to know how to use it, or mass spectrometry or other stuff. Like it will be hard to have this at home, and it will be way too expensive. So I don't think it's feasible. And for myself at least, what is important for me is not like everyone can do their stuff in our own home. I mean, for research, yeah, for research practices, but even with that, I think it's important to be collective. I think it's important to do stuff together and to think about how the more vulnerable of us can have access to medicine. That's the more important thing in my point of view. So I will not advocate for everyone to do it in their own, but I will more advocate to think about not that much the FDA and GMP certification. I do think it's great that someone is looking at what kind of medicine you receive, because they're kind of protecting you a little, but more on the patent system. Like you could still have the FDA looking at the quality of the medicine you receive and making sure that the quality of the medicine that is put in the market is a high quality and no one is at risk. That's what it was creating at the first place. Because people were just getting sick. That's why the FDA was putting together. But you don't have to have the patent system. The patent system is not is business related. Like it's nothing to do with the quality process, or the fact that no one tried to intoxicate you or something like that.
Yeah, that's super interesting to think about. Yeah, so another question that also came up in the chat, I'll let Justin add a question after, because I think he has a lot of questions about patents especially. But Janice asks, how open is open source insulin? In other words, at what scale of impact do you imagine open insulin having? Would a insulin cooperative help a select group of individuals who really need insulin, or would it be targeted broadly to anyone in the state?
That's a very good question, and that's something we are still figuring out. The good thing is, let's say our mission is to provide for everyone who needs it. That is where we want to get. And the way that we envision cooperative is to be, so we say that it will be kind of governed by a patient, but of course, like there will be a little, like at some point it will be hard to be every patient, like how you define who is a patient or not. So it probably be that the cooperative is like half patient, have workers, but it's not every patient that is there. Like every patient can have their say, or at some point perhaps get elected to be in the governance, thing like that, but it's probably not like everyone. This kind of cooperative already exists, and in general is when, so you have like a third party that's in general is more around like environmental issue. So you want, for example, people from the city around to have their say about what's like the industry is doing, something like that. So that's the way we see it. So everyone could have access. I think the idea is to provide for as many people as possible. And then for the governance, we really have to figure out what will be the best way to do it. And that's also something we're working on, to start building relationship with advocacy group, patient group, to make sure they're aware of what we do, and we can reach out to the people who most need it. And the impact, I think it depends. I think if we can collaborate with a CMO, they are very huge capacity. So basically, I think we will be able to very quickly, if we get FDA approval, we will be able to produce enough, at least for people who ration or don't have access right now in the US. I think we can get to this point very fast. For people who have an insurance and already have their own like insulin analog, they won't switch, and that's completely fair. If you can afford it. But I think we will be able to provide for people who don't have access or people who are rationing.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Justin.
Yeah, my question was going to be around the drivers on the cost curve, on why that's been rising, and then why so few players, and what are the barriers to entry? Because I would not suspect that it would be IP, although you've noted some good improvements in the types of products that have been coming online. It seems to be a sizable market. Why have there not been a lot of people entering and driving the price lower in a competitive sense?
So I have my point of view that I cannot prove. That is just kind of my analysis, because I cannot prove that that's what's happening behind the scene. I do think IP is protecting, and also the fact that they have a brand recognition. So let's say these two things. Why they've been raising prices is because they can. So basically, they have a controlled market. They will know in advance if someone tries to go to the FDA, because it takes so much time, like everyone will know, so they know. The diabetic cannot go away. When you are diabetic, you are for life, so that's it. So you cannot go away, and you are trapped there. And if they want to raise prices, it's kind of nothing people can do against that, especially because in the US, you cannot negotiate the price. Like every other country will negotiate the price when they give you access to their market, but in US is illegal. And the fact that there's no other players, I'm still kind of, because you can do research and development and get. I think with now that the FDA, perhaps we will see a little more players. I don't know what's happening behind the door that makes that there's no more players on the insulin market.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense. I mean, since what you're talking about to me on the approval, because insulin has been around for such a long time period, that we should have a shorter, more streamlined approval process through FDA. And like you say, as a chronic condition, that should mean that the persistence of that market should give people confidence to enter, to develop their own product. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. I'm sure it has been, the two companies being in lockstep. It's essentially collusion around the market and increasing prices because, like you say, they can. But it does seem like that should be able to be broken and disrupted by the additional people entering. I mean, especially granted that they have the brand protection, but that's why the relative balance on the price point, you would think, would enable that. So interesting.
Yeah, I guess I had a question too. Like, do you think that with Open Insulin, I think you mentioned a bit like how like companies are able to, they have the brand recognition. Do you think that they feel threatened by something like Open Insulin, or would they eventually reach out to work with the collective rather than ignore the kind of pending crisis? And that's like my first question. And my second question is like, what got you interested in this kind of realm of open insulin and trying to make things more open source and open access, especially medicine?
Just to clarify your first question is, you were asking if pharma will just ignore us or try to collaborate with us? So
yeah, what's your perspective 5 years down the line, say?
They won't collaborate. The good thing for now, I think they don't believe that we will get somewhere. So I think they're just avoiding us. I mean, we are very small, but we are still threatening their business model. That's what we are doing. Like if we are successful, if more people believe in us, if people are saying, wait, but if Open Insulin did it, why we don't do it for other medicine? We will crush the system model in the way they make money. So they won't be happy about it for sure. I don't know how the backlash will come up. Perhaps they won't be, they won't do anything. Perhaps they will, but for sure we will not be collaborating. I think they will say they won't, but at the end of the day, they won't do it. And for the second question, actually the first question, I think we will collaborate perhaps more with, especially outside of the US, because what happened is, so in the US, I mean, there is a big problem for fair access, but the insulin is producing here. So US is kind of protected at some point, and that's also with Europe. Europe produces, I think, I think most of the insulin is producing in Europe. But like in Europe too, like the insulin is producing there, so you can negotiate the price at some point, you can decide. But for a lot of other countries, they don't have access to insulin. They have to kind of beg the pharma to produce. So I don't think with perhaps where Open Insulin will be the most successful is working with these countries to say, hey, look, we have this protocol. You can use it, you can use our strain, and you can produce on your state facility or whatever you want, and provide for your people insulin, perhaps state produced insulin. And the second question, I get in a little by chance because I was living like 10 minutes away from CCL. So I checked the place, and then I heard about Open Insulin. I'm a biochemist by training, so I saw it as a very nice way. For me, I think it was the first time that I'm like, oh, I can do something outside of the lab with my my training, like my background, that could have like a positive impact. So that things that what drew me there, and also the idea to do stuff differently, to really try to come up with ways to structurally solve the problem, not just say, oh, so what pharma are doing now, they're doing coupon, so they give you a coupon and you can get insulin for like 1 or 2 months, but really thinking, okay, let's think about what are the problems and how we can structure the business model differently, so we don't end up at the same point. So let's not do a startup. We know how startup will end up. Startup, you need capital, and once you get capital, then they want to get their money back, and then they will push you to increase the price of your medicine. So there's no way you can get away for that because that's the way the business model is structured. So let's go and look at another business structure. And I think I stay at Open Insulin because it's just an amazing place. Every week we have, as I say, more than 40 people, in different working group, but getting together to work towards this this goal. And some of them are people with diabetes, but some are not. They're just, very just passionate about this. And it has been an incredible experience to work with these people.
Cool, that's awesome. Okay, I think that kind of somewhat ends the talk. I guess the last slide is this slide. So thank you all again for attending this seminar series. Please follow us on social media at on social media on Facebook and Twitter at these specific user links. And for any updates about the group, about the seminar series, and about any other types of activities we end up doing. And you can also sign up for our mailing list at the link, which I will send in the chat, so that you can stay updated about the seminar series and hear more about what's going on. And so other than that, I think that ends our seminar. So thank you again, Dr. Lassalle, for coming to speak for us.
Thank you for having me.